Virgil Van Dijk this season has been the best centre-back in the league. Actually, to be honest, he's been the best centre-back in the world. After the horrors of last season, there were many questioning if Van Dijk's time at the top had come to an end. So just how did VVD turn it around? Well, in this video I'm going to explain to you how, but before we get into that guys, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed, and also turn on post notifications so you're notified when we upload. As we all know, Van Dijk ruptured his ACL in October 2020 against Everton. By the way, I still don't know how Pickford did not get a red card for that challenge. I don't think he even got a yellow. So yeah, after he returned back from that horrific injury, first season back, he was largely flawless. Okay, he wasn't as imperious as before, but he was still excellent. I mean, he got into the team of the year. It was the second season, however, that's when the cracks started to show. First game of the season, Van Dijk gets turned inside out and gives a penalty away to Mitrovic. That made people look up and think, whoa, we've not seen that before. That's not supposed to happen. Couple that with the following matches where he allowed Zaha to have a shot which he buried in the bottom corner. And also the Old Trafford game as well, where he put his hands behind his back and gave Sancho the freedom of Manchester to just stick the ball in the goal. Those three games, that start to the season completely ruined the aura and the fear factor that he had created for so long. Players were now looking at Van Dijk and thinking, I can get it. They weren't scared anymore. Because the 5 years previous, Van Dijk's performances had created a wave of dominance never seen before in this league. Instead of attackers going at him and trying to score, strikers would simply turn back in fear when confronted with his presence. His aura was real, or as some say, his watch was real. So after those 3 games, that's when fans and pundits started creating a separation between Van Dijk pre-injury and him post-injury. However, this wasn't the first time we had heard of that. After he got dropped in his first game back, you heard some murmurings. Is Van Dijk going to be the same player? Has the injury robbed him of his powers? However, most of that was dispelled as he was largely excellent in his first season back. I mean, Liverpool were 2 games away from winning a historic quadruple and he was a big part of that. However, there's a theory that rather than the first, it's usually the second season where you really start to feel the full force of the injury. When you first come back to the field after so long, you're kind of playing on adrenaline. You're that excited that you're playing football again that you don't even think about it. It's only after that adrenaline wears off that you really start to see the level you're actually at. For most players, this is not that big of an issue, but for Van Dijk, who was that imperious for so long, in his head he still thought he was that same player. In his eyes, nothing had really changed. The injury hadn't affected how many games he could play. I mean, he'd appeared in 34 Premier League games in 21-22 and he'd started in all 34. He didn't even get subbed off once. In total, he'd played 60 games in all competitions that year for club and country. Over 4,600 minutes. That is unheard of for a player coming back from such a horrific injury. So that added to his toll. Started last season, you could tell he'd lost a yard of pace. However, as I said earlier, the guy was still in denial. I'll use FIFA as an example. So let's just say Van Dijk, prime Van Dijk, he had 85 pace. Extremely quick for a centre-back. He could give guys head starts and still catch them comfortably. However, with age and a big injury he had, he understandably lost a yard of pace. So he has 80 pace now, still quick, probably quicker than most centre-backs in the world, but it's not what we had before. So when he'd give the same attackers a yard like he used to do before, now they'd get away. He wouldn't be able to catch them. His judgment or his bearings, as we can say, were completely off. We saw this especially, I remember a game last January against Brentford. Ball gets played in behind, him and Mbeumo get in a foot race, where previously we'd expect Van Dijk to just turn on the turbo jets and retrieve the ball comfortably. This time it wasn't the case. And Mbeumo ended up going through and Alisson had to make a top save, otherwise we would have conceded. Fast forward to this season, in the latest game against Brentford, it was almost an identical scenario. Again, ball gets played in behind him and Mbeumo getting a foot race, but this time he wins the ball clean. That's because this season he's understood he's not as quick as he was previously, so he has to anticipate earlier, read the game, get himself in prime position. He can't just rely on pure athleticism. That's why this season he's been immense. This ain't even biased speaking, but he's been comfortably the best centre back in the world. We've conceded the least amount of goals in the Premier League this season, and he's probably the biggest reason as to why. Of course, Alisson has played a role, but he was unbelievable last season, and we still conceded so many goals. The difference this year has been that Van Dijk has returned to a top level. And what makes this even more impressive is he's doing this. We've done this with McAllister as a DM. The teams around us, our rivals, have much better protection for their defenders. Man City have Rodri shielding the defence. Arsenal have Declan Rice. They also a lot of the time play centre-backs in full-back positions where we play Syndikas at left-back and Trent at right-back. As Eto said,
different. It's totally different.
Last season though, it was even worse. The midfielders we had were on a massive decline. Fabinho and Henderson just didn't have the legs to press for 90 minutes and their lack of pace also made them slow to the tackle and slow to recover when beaten. The forward line also just didn't press like it used to in his pomp. In their prime, Mane, Salah and Firmino used to play near enough every single game, but now Mane had left the club and Firmino was in and out of the team due to injury. Darwin came in and he did not understand the language at all, so it took him months to grasp what the manager was asking him to do. Those two factors made the counter press completely ineffective, and that's probably the main source of protection in a Klopp system. Klopp's philosophy is basically if his team presses the opposition in their half, they won't be able to have time on the ball to pick out quality passes to hurt us, and then most will either play into our pressure and get dispossessed, or they'll pump it long and he trusts his centre-backs and his goalkeeper to sweep up. Pressing is not just defensive though, it can also be a top source of chance creation too. Klopp famously said counter-pressing is the best playmaker there is. The best moment to win the ball is immediately after your team has just lost it. The opponent is still looking for orientation where to pass the ball. He will have his eyes off the game to make his tackle or interception, and he will have expended energy. Both will make him vulnerable. However, you can't just press willy-nilly. You need legs to press and the timing needs to be spot on. If you're slow to get out, the opposition will just have played through your press and in a few passes will have bypassed your midfield and will be running at your back line. This what happened a lot last season. The game that probably epitomizes the most was Napoli away. We played a midfield that day of an aging Milner, an aging Fabinho and a youngster Harvey Elliott. None of them had the required energy to make up the ground on time, so we got sliced open like a knife through butter. People after the game blamed Van Dijk, and I'm not saying he was blameless, but it wasn't entirely his fault. The problems were mainly elsewhere. So after you're losing so many games, conceding so many goals, it's only natural that your confidence drops. And once your confidence goes, it's not that easy to get back. Especially when a team overall aren't doing too well either. Because you can't even rely on your teammates to bail you out. You don't even know if they're going to make a mistake next. People always talk about positive momentum and how hard it is to stop, but negative momentum, that is just as hard to turn around. All these factors that I've just mentioned culminated into Van Dijk not having the best season last year, but I can't lie, there's one factor that I haven't spoken about and it might be controversial, but it's the World Cup. Now this is just my opinion, but I think Van Dijk was saving himself a bit for the World Cup. Now hear me out. This is a man who's never played in a major tournament for his country. And not only would he played in this one, he would have been the captain, leading his country out with millions watching, and if Netherlands were to win that trophy, he'd be the one lifting up. He'd be the one in all them legendary photos. I can't lie, it's poor and people won't want to accept it, people won't want to hear it, but it's only understandable. You're not going to go into a 50-50 fully committed a couple weeks before the tournament starts. It's only normal. You're going to be thinking like, oh my god, imagine I get injured, imagine I miss the tournament. And it's not like the guy's 23 years old, he's above 30, so he's not got that much, if any, World Cups left, especially as captain. And what makes that voice in his head even stronger, he missed the last Euros. Euro 2020 or 2021, he missed that through injury and he would have been a captain too. So that would have made him even more desperate to make sure he was there for this one. This season though, the added responsibility of the armband has done him well. He now feels that responsibility to not let the team down. He also has to set an example for others to follow. I mean, you can't be a captain telling others what to do if you're not doing your job. You can't be seen to be slacking off or being complacent when you've got the armband. You're the one who's supposed to set standards off the field and on it too. So finally, I'm gonna end on this. For those of you that are saying Prime Van Dijk is done, apart from a yard of pace, this is Prime Van Dijk that we're seeing this season. Don't get me wrong, he's still not on the same level as he was in 18-19 and 19-20. But that's no slight. I mean, who is? Ability-wise, that's probably the best centre-back I've ever seen. He had everything. Pace, strength, positioning, aerial ability, reading of the game. He had it all. Going back to that FIFA example, in his prime, he was probably like a 94 rated, 95 rated card. One of the best of all time, but definitely the best in the world. After the injury, he's probably dropped off to like a 91, 92 rated player, but he's still the best in the world. Just because he's dropped off from his prime level, that does not mean the other centre-backs have surpassed him. Them guys were nowhere near him before. Now granted they're slightly closer to him, that I can accept, but to say they're better, that is nonsense. Diaz, Saliba, Stones, these guys are top centre-backs, some of the best centre-backs in the world, but they're just not better than Van Dijk, bro. It's simple as. One game coming up against any striker in the world, I'm taking Van Dijk every day of the week. Speaking of strikers, Darwin Nunez's improvement this season has somewhat contributed to Van Dijk's resurgence. If you want to know just how much he improved and how he done it, watch this video.